Yes, 1947's Out of the Past, starring Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer. Let me tell you why I think this is a great film noir. I think one of the best ever.
In 1947, Out of the Past shocked audiences with its brutal murder scene. But what Robert Mitchum did next was so shocking. Hollywood buried it for decades. Now, the lost footage finally emerges, exposing a moment so calculating, so morally corrupt, that even noir fans were stunned. From deliberately planted fingerprints to a hidden corpse, this is the scene that crossed the line from darkness to depravity, and the real reason it was locked away. Daniel Menwaring's 1946 novel, Build My Gallows High, was the start of something big. It told the story of Red Bailey, a former private investigator trying to leave his past behind. But his past wasn't done with him. Years earlier, he got caught up with a dangerous woman named Kathy Moffat and her gangster boyfriend, Whit Sterling. Now, Whit wants him back, and Red has no choice. The book moved between the past and present, just like the movie would later do. What's funny is that Mainwaring didn't even like detective stories. He thought they were boring and hated figuring out who done it. He wanted to write something different, something more about fate than mystery. That's what made the story feel so raw. RKO saw something in it and paid $20,000 for the rights, a huge amount for an unpublished book. At first, the movie was supposed to keep the original title, Build My Gallows High. It made sense. Red was a man who couldn't outrun his own fate. But in 1947, RKO wanted to be sure people would actually watch it. They hired Dr. George Gallup's Audience Research Institute to test reactions. The results were bad. People thought the title sounded depressing, like a movie about executions. That meant trouble at the box office. The studio scrambled to find a better name and finally landed on Out of the Past. Meanwhile, the script also went through a lot of changes before the movie was finally made. Mainwaring's first draft was rejected for being too complicated. The studio thought there were too many flashbacks and side characters. They brought in James M. Cain, the writer of Double Indemnity, to fix it. But his version was so different from the book that RKO threw it out. Cain made Anne's character less interesting and turned Kathy into just another predictable femme fatale. That didn't work. Eventually, Frank Fenton, a B-movie writer, came in and cleaned everything up. He merged two of the book's villains into one and made things simpler. He also wrote some of the movie's most famous lines, like, "You're like a leaf that the wind blows from one gutter to another." Even though he played a huge role, he wasn't credited. Even when the script was done, the film still had problems. Producer Warren Duff managed to secure 64 days for filming, which was rare for a noir, and he got permission to shoot in Lake Tahoe for a more realistic feel. Then came the casting problem. Humphrey Bogart was the first choice for the lead role in Out of the Past, but Warner Brothers refused to let him work for another studio. They didn't want his star power helping a rival. So instead, the role went to Robert Mitchum, who was barely known at the time. That one decision changed everything. Mitchum had a way of acting that felt effortless. He played Jeff Bailey like a man who had already lost but was too tired to fight it. He smoked, he stayed calm, and he accepted his fate. He didn't look like he was pretending. It felt real. Off-screen, he was just as unpredictable. He smoked weed on set, joking that it was just part of staying in character. One of the craziest things that happened during filming was when he was flying to a location shoot. The plane crashed, smashing through a fence and hitting an outhouse. Mitchum just got out, dusted himself off, and hitchhiked the rest of the way to set. Later, he laughed about it, saying the movie's lighting was so bad, the only real light came from people's cigarettes. He also kept pulling pranks, like when he told a reporter that a drunk extra was actually one of the movie's producers. The studio was always worried about what he would do next, but that same attitude made him perfect for the role. Meanwhile, Kirk Douglas was just starting out when he played Whit Sterling, the rich gangster in the movie. He wasn't the lead, but he stole every scene. His character was polite on the surface, but full of rage underneath. During filming, he shocked everyone by slapping Jane Greer so hard that she almost fell over. That wasn't in the script, but the director kept it because it made his character even scarier. Behind the scenes, Douglas and Mitchum didn't get along. Douglas was serious about acting, always pushing himself, while Mitchum barely seemed to try. They clashed, both wanting to be the center of attention. Later, Douglas admitted that he wanted to destroy Mitchum to prove he was better. That rivalry made their scenes together feel even more intense. On the other hand, Jane Greer almost didn't get to be in the movie at all. She was under contract with RKO, but Howard Hughes, the man who ran the studio, was angry at her. She had rejected him romantically, and he decided to punish her by blocking her from getting any roles. He even told her, "As long as I own this studio, you won't work." But Greer found a way to fight back. She got married and became pregnant, and Hughes realized that if he kept pushing her out, it would make him look bad. So he finally let her take the role of Kathy Moffat, one of the most dangerous femme fatales in movie history. Kathy wasn't just another beautiful woman in a noir film. She was ruthless. She could lie, manipulate, and even kill without hesitation, all while looking completely innocent. Critics loved Greer's performance, saying she made Kathy both terrifying and fascinating. However, in 1947, RKO was in big trouble. The studio had lost $1.8 million that year, even though they made 39 movies, including Out of the Past. They gave this film a $1.3 million budget, which was decent for them, but still tight. They wanted movies made fast, not perfectly. Director Jacques Tourneur and cinematographer Nicolas Musarasa had just 64 days to get it done. They filmed some scenes in Lake Tahoe and Bridgeport, California, but to save money, most of it was shot on sound stages in Hollywood and Culver City. The Tahoe scenes were a nightmare. The crew had to sneak equipment across state lines to avoid paying union fees in Nevada. At one point, local police shut down filming at Lower Twin Lake because they didn't have the right permits. Money problems were everywhere. The Acapulco bar, where Jeff meets Kathy, wasn't even a real bar. It was built on RKO's Encino Ranch using leftover props from old John Wayne westerns. A big car chase was planned, but they realized they couldn't afford stunt drivers, so they scrapped it. Instead, they filmed close-ups of Mitchum's face, using shadows to create tension. Then, just before the movie came out in 1948, Robert Mitchum got arrested, and everything changed. On September 1st, LAPD stormed a house in Laurel Canyon and caught Mitchum smoking weed with actress Lila Leeds. It was a setup. The police had tipped off photographers, so the press got perfect shots of Mitchum in handcuffs. RKO freaked out. They stopped promoting the movie and even thought about cutting some of his scenes. But Howard Hughes had a different idea. He thought the scandal would actually help ticket sales. Mitchum didn't care. He went to jail for 50 days, but instead of ruining him, it made him even cooler. Guards let him smoke while he worked, and his mugshot became legendary. Life magazine did a photo shoot of him milking cows in prison, joking that jail was like Palm Springs without the riffraff. Audiences loved it. After the scandal, Out of the Past made $2.1 million. People wanted to see the convict who outsmarts the cops. In 1951, lawyers proved the police had set him up and overturned the conviction. But Mitchum didn't care. "The dirtier they think I am, the better I fit the part," he said. Meanwhile, the film's look was one of the things that made it special. Musaraka, RKO's Prince of Darkness, used lighting to show the character's morality, or lack of it. Kathy's turning point, when she murders Jeff's partner, Fisher, is a perfect example. Before that, she looked soft and innocent, lit with a warm glow. But the moment she kills, the light turns harsh. Deep shadows cut across her face, making her look dangerous. She stands in a pitch-black doorway, showing that she's crossed a line she can't come back from. Jeff, on the other hand, is trapped in his past. In his gas station scenes, shadows from window blinds fall across his body like prison bars. No matter what he does, he's stuck. One of Musaraka's boldest moves was using cigarette smoke to tell the story. In one key scene, Jeff and Kathy are lying together after sleeping together. Smoke fills the air, making everything look hazy. Studio executives didn't like it. They thought it was too much, but Tourneur fought to keep it. He said the smoke represented how blind Jeff and Kathy were to reality. Then there was a scene that felt too much. Jeff Bailey walks into Leonard Eales's apartment and finds his dead body. Most people would freak out, but not Jeff. He doesn't scream, doesn't run. He does something colder. He picks up the body and moves it to a different apartment. He knows exactly what he's doing. By hiding the body somewhere else, he makes the whole crime scene a mess. Now, the police won't be able to figure out when or where Eales died. That means the blame could fall on anyone, him, Kathy, or Whit Sterling's criminal gang. But here's the strangest part. Jeff doesn't just hide the body. He actually leaves his fingerprints behind on purpose. He touches Eales's liquor decanter, making sure the police will find his prints. It's almost like he wants to be caught, or maybe he knows he's already too deep in this mess to escape. At the same time, Kathy is playing her own game. She pretends to be Eales's secretary and calls the building manager, acting all worried so that the body gets discovered when she wants it to be. She's not scared. She's controlling the whole situation, making sure it works in her favor. In this world, everyone is either hunting someone or being hunted. Then there's the $40,000 bank book. It's just sitting there, waiting to be found. That money connects Kathy to an old murder, the killing of Fisher. Jeff thinks moving Eales's body will help him survive, but really, he's just letting Kathy pull him in even deeper. The body isn't just a problem he needs to get rid of. It's proof that he and Kathy are trapped together, unable to escape each other. Jeff tries to cover up the truth. Kathy turns it into a weapon. The way the scene is filmed makes everything feel even darker. The room is filled with shadows. When Jeff drags the body, his face is split between light and darkness, like he's stuck between good and evil. The closet where he hides Eales is small, almost like a coffin. It feels like he's not just hiding a body, he's burying himself in a crime he'll never escape. The lighting from below makes shadows rise up like prison bars, like the world is closing in on him. Even the idea of hiding a body in a closet has meaning. It's like the old saying, "Skeletons in the closet." Jeff is literally putting his secrets away, hoping no one finds them. But the empty apartment where he hides Eales is important too. It's a reminder that all these characters are empty inside, always trying to fill a hole they never can. The way the camera moves makes Jeff look huge, like a killer standing over his victim. But at the same time, it makes the space around him feel smaller, like he's trapped. When he shuts the closet door, the camera just lingers on the empty room. That's what makes it so eerie. Sometimes, what isn't shown is scarier than what is. Later, the same trick is used when Kathy kills Whit off screen. Her shadow takes over the whole screen while Jeff finds the body. In this world, even shadows have a role to play. This scene almost got cut from the movie. Hollywood had strict rules back then about how crime could be shown. The people in charge of censorship thought Jeff's actions made crime look too easy, too normal. Audiences were disturbed by how calm he was while moving the body. Joseph Breen, who ran the censorship office, hated that the camera focused so much on the corpse. He thought it would make violence feel too real. The studio, RKO, refused to change it, but not because they wanted to keep the art of the film intact. They just didn't want to spend extra money on reshoots, especially since Howard Hughes was taking over the studio at the time. The only reason the scene survived was because the director, Jacques Tourneur, found a way around the rules. Instead of showing Jeff moving the body, he filmed him going in and out of the closet, letting the audience imagine what happened. That was enough to satisfy the censors, while keeping the scene's impact. Even the dialogue was carefully written. At one point, Kathy tells Jeff, "You're like a dead man." It sounds like a threat, but it's also a joke about how the censors tried to clean up noir films by avoiding direct violence. When the movie came out, critics couldn't agree on what to think about this scene. Some hated it. The New York Times said it was rotten and made crime look cool. Apart from that, Jeff thought he had found love. Kathy was beautiful, charming, and seemed like everything he ever wanted. But in one moment, inside a quiet cabin, everything changed. They had been running, trying to escape Whit Sterling, the dangerous gangster they had crossed. But then Jack Fisher, Jeff's ex-partner, found them. He wasn't just after revenge. He wanted money, $40,000. And he wasn't afraid to humiliate Kathy to get it. He called her a cheap piece of baggage, laughing as if he had already won. Jeff reacted instantly. He threw a punch, and suddenly, the room exploded into chaos. It wasn't a choreographed movie fight. It was real, rough, and ugly. No music, no dramatic speeches. But then, before Jeff could stop it, everything ended with a single gunshot. Kathy had picked up a gun and fired. Fisher dropped dead. Jeff stared at her, trying to make sense of what just happened. But Kathy didn't look shaken. She just said, "You wouldn't have killed him. He would have been against us."
You wouldn't have killed him. He'd been against us.
That was when Jeff saw the truth. Kathy hadn't killed Fisher because she had to. She did it because it was easier, because it kept her in control. Then came the proof of her lies, a bank book left behind, showing she had stolen Whit's money. Jeff had trusted her, but now he knew she was only looking out for herself. She wasn't desperate or scared. She was making sure she stayed ahead. Critics say this is what made Kathy different from other femme fatales. She never begged, never acted like a victim. She just kept going, like murder was nothing more than a way forward. Film scholar Carol St. Martin said Kathy wasn't just a manipulator, she was something colder. She didn't trick people into doing what she wanted. She made decisions, and if someone got in her way, she got rid of them. Playing Kathy had consequences for Greer. After Out of the Past, studios kept offering her the same kind of roles. "Every script I got, I was shooting someone by the third act," she joked later. But Kathy's legacy lasted. Decades later, characters like Catherine Tremmell in Basic Instinct still carried the same energy. Women who didn't beg, who didn't just manipulate, but who made decisions and never looked back. Meanwhile, the ending of Out of the Past was shocking for its time. Hollywood movies in the 1940s usually had happy endings where the hero survived or justice was served. This film did the opposite. In the final scene, Kathy shoots Jeff during a police ambush. But before she can escape, the police open fire and kill her too. Both main characters die within seconds. The director, Jacques Tourneur, and the writer, Daniel Manwaring, had to fight the studio for this ending. The studio wanted Jeff to survive, but they refused, saying it would ruin the story. The film was about fate, and fate wasn't going to let Jeff walk away. The Hollywood Production Code, which made sure movies had moral lessons, wasn't happy either. They didn't like that Kathy was pure evil and never had a moment of regret. But Tourneur wouldn't change it. This was a noir film, and in noir, fate always wins. The way the final shootout happens makes it even more brutal. Kathy doesn't kill Jeff because she's angry. She does it because she still wants to control the situation. She looks him in the eye and says, "You're no good, and neither am I." Then, the police kill her in a chaotic burst of gunfire. There's no moment of justice, no sense of victory, just two people dead in the front seat of a car. It was a shocking moment, especially after World War II, when people were questioning old ideas about heroes and villains. Some critics later said this scene captured the feeling of the time. Roger Ebert called it terribly beautiful because it showed how random and cruel life could be. Other movies before this had tragic endings, but in Casablanca, for example, the hero's sacrifice meant something. Here, it was just a dead end. Later movies, like Chinatown, copied this idea, where no matter what the hero does, he can't escape his fate. Jeff and Kathy's relationship in Out of the Past was a clever way of breaking the Hays Code without actually breaking it. The code had strict rules. Movies couldn't show affairs or let criminals go unpunished. But the director, Jacques Tourneur, and the writer, Daniel Menwaring, worked around these rules by showing things in a subtle way. When Jeff first sees Kathy in Mexico, she steps out of the sunlight wearing a white dress. Her face is partly hidden in shadows. They don't show them kissing or in bed together, but the way the scenes feel, the slow moments, the way Kathy talks, makes it obvious they are lovers. When she says, "You're no good and neither am I," it's clear they both know they're in too deep. Kathy's ending should have gone against the code completely. The rules said that bad characters had to be punished, but Kathy kills Jeff and then dies in a police shootout. The problem is, she doesn't feel like a villain. She feels like a tragic character. The censorship office didn't like that, but the studio, RKO, found a way to keep it. They made her death look like chaos instead of punishment, which let them get away with it. Jeff's reaction to everything was another way the film challenged the rules. The code required movies to show that bad choices lead to bad consequences, but Jeff never really blames Kathy. Instead, he just accepts it. When he tells her, "You're like a leaf the wind blows from gutter to gutter," he's not judging her. He's just saying, this is how things are. Kathy's control over men also caused problems with the censors. They didn't like that she wasn't just a love interest, but someone who could manipulate men with ease. In the first version of the script, she told Jeff, "I'd kill to keep you." That was too much, so they changed it to, "I don't want to die," which made her seem more desperate than dangerous. But even with these changes, the film still showed her power. In one key scene, she meets Jeff in a dark alley. Her face is half lit by a neon sign as she tells him, "You belong to me." There's no physical contact, which meant the censors allowed it. But the way the moment plays out makes it clear she's in control. Jeff's lack of guilt also broke the rules. The Hays Code said that heroes had to be good people who learned from their mistakes. Jeff never does. The censors forced the studio to cut some of his lines, like one where he tells Anne, "Money's just something you use, like a gun." It made crime sound too easy, so they removed it. But instead of changing the film, the studio kept Mitchum's expressions. In one scene, Jeff watches Kathy kill Fisher and just smirks. He doesn't say anything, but that smirk tells the audience everything. Even the ending was risky. The deaf-mute kid lies to Anne to make Jeff seem better than he was. The code didn't like that, but the censorship office let it pass because they saw it as a warning about lying rather than a celebration of it. Outside the US, censors were even harsher. In France, they cut Kathy's murder of Fisher from 45 seconds to 15, removing the close-ups of his bloody face and her calmly reloading the gun. In Britain, they removed an entire subplot about blackmail and tax fraud because it made post-war governments look corrupt. Strangely, this made the film's love story seem even darker, because without those crime elements, all that was left was Jeff and Kathy's doomed relationship. In West Germany, they cut 17 minutes, removing any suggestion that Jeff and Kathy lived together in San Francisco, erasing a bullet-riddled car close up in the final shootout, and cutting Jeff's sarcastic remark to wit, "You're a businessman. I hear they're writing new laws for you." These edits turned the movie into a simpler crime story, removing a lot of its deeper meaning. But ironically, these butchered versions ended up influencing French filmmakers. Jean-Pierre Melville, a key figure in the French New Wave, admired how the chopped-up version made the story feel fragmented and mysterious. Out of the Past, 1947, didn't make much money, just $90,000 in profit, which wasn't a lot even back then. But that number doesn't tell the whole story. RKO Radio Pictures, the studio behind the film, was in deep trouble. That same year, it lost $1.8 million. enough to make 3 big-budget movies or a dozen smaller ones that actually turned a profit. At the time, movie theaters were packed. Every week, about 90 million Americans went to see films, but they wanted something light and fun. Movies like Forever Amber, which was the year's biggest hit, or comedies with Bing Crosby were what people preferred. But Out of the Past was nothing like that. The movie showed a world where there was no way out, where even bright sunlight felt dark and threatening. When it first came out, critics couldn't agree on what to think. Bosley Crowther from the New York Times liked Robert Mitchum's performance, calling it magnificently cheeky, but he also admitted he had no idea what was going on. He even said trying to figure it out was a challenge in itself. Variety called it a hard-boiled melodrama with plenty to keep people interested, but reviews were all over the place. Today, critics see it differently. They call it effortless and even sublime nonsense. The confusion came from the way the movie mixed different genres. It wasn't just a film noir, it was also a doomed love story. And, in some ways, a Western about fate catching up with someone who tried to outrun it. People at the time were especially frustrated with the second act, set in San Francisco. The story got complicated with tax records, betrayals, and a staged murder. And audiences felt lost. Even Mitchum's character, Jeff Bailey, seems confused when he says, "I think I'm in a frame." But later, critics realized that the movie's messy, twisting plot was actually the point. It wasn't just about a crime. It was about how life after the war felt unpredictable and full of traps. Roger Ebert even called it the greatest cigarette-smoking movie of all time, saying that all the swirling smoke in the film perfectly matched its moral fog. Nothing was clear, and nobody was truly innocent. Jane Greer's performance also split opinions. Variety thought she was stylish and appealing, but some critics compared her to Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity and found her lacking. Back then, people didn't know what to make of her character, Kathy Moffat. Her shifting loyalties seemed random and unconvincing. But in the 1970s, during the rise of second-wave feminism, people started to see her role differently. Instead of just another femme fatale, Kathy was now seen as a woman using the way men saw her to survive. What once looked like weakness or inconsistency was now understood as strategy.